Welcome back. I want you to stand with me at the edge of a different silence. Not the silence of abandonment, but the silence that comes just before history changes forever. Today, we step into ancient Herculaneum. Walk with me through its streets, not as tourists, not as observers, but as people who still believe tomorrow will arrive. By the autumn of 79 AD, Herculaneum was not as large as Pompeii, nor as loud, nor as crowded. Its population likely hovered around 5,000 souls, but what it lacked in scale, it made up for in refinement. This was a seaside town of marble columns and shaded courtyards, of frescoed walls and terraced houses that looked out toward the shimmering Bay of Naples. The sea was its heartbeat. Fishermen set out at dawn. Merchants unloaded goods at modest docks. Wealthy Romans escaped here from the noise of the capital, building villas that captured the breeze and framed the horizon like living paintings. In this journey, I will use modern reconstructions and shifting perspectives to move us through these spaces, to tilt the camera, to step inside rooms long sealed in darkness, to watch light fall across mosaics as it once did. The goal is not simply to see Herculaneum. It is to feel how certain it must have felt. And if you stay with me until the end, we'll stand in the present, in the shadow of the same mountain, and see what survived beneath layers of volcanic fury, preserved not in ruin, but in eerie perfection. Before the fire and ash, before the night that erased it from the map, Herculaneum had centuries of quiet growth. Founded, according to legend, by Hercules himself, the town carried an air of myth from the beginning. Whether or not the hero ever walked these shores, the people believed in the story, and belief shaped cities as surely as stone. By the 4th century BC, the settlement had come under Samnite influence, later absorbed into the expanding Roman Republic. Its grid of streets was smaller and more intimate than Pompeii's. Its houses rose in tiers along the slope, descending toward the sea. Imagine approaching the town from the water, white walls catching the sun, red-tiled roofs stacked above one another, balconies draped in cloth, the smell of salt and olive oil in the air. The urban layout reflected both practicality and privilege. Cardo and Decumana streets intersected at right angles, lined with shops and workshops at ground level, private residences above. But unlike Pompeii, Herculaneum's homes often extended upward, sometimes 3 stories tall, an architectural ambition made possible by the town's wealth. Let's step into one of those homes. The House of the Neptune mosaic stood near the Decumanus Maximus, its entrance modest, almost restrained. But beyond the doorway, the space opened into elegance. In the courtyard, sunlight filtered through an opening in the roof, pooling around a marble basin that collected rainwater. On the walls, vibrant frescoes glowed, reds and yellows so intense they seemed newly painted. And in one room, the famous mosaic, Neptune and Amphitrite, assembled from thousands of tiny tesserae, frozen in eternal stillness. This was not simply decoration, it was declaration. It told visitors this household had taste, education, money. The sea god presided over their domestic world, a reminder of both livelihood and protection. Elsewhere in town, the House of the Wooden Partition revealed another layer of daily life. Sliding wooden panels divided rooms, and unlike almost anywhere else in the Roman world, those wooden elements would survive the disaster to come. At midday, Herculaneum would have been alive with movement. Bakers tending ovens, cloth merchants calling out prices, children weaving through columns in shaded porticos. At the public baths, steam rose into vaulted ceilings as citizens discussed politics, trade, and the latest news from Rome. The suburban baths were a marvel of engineering. Heated floors circulated warm air beneath polished surfaces. Walls were coated in marble veneer. Bronze fixtures gleamed in lamplight. If you stood in the caldarium, the hot room, you would feel not only heat, but sophistication. This was Rome's promise delivered even to its smaller towns: comfort, order, control over nature itself. And yet nature was waiting. Behind the town, rising almost gently in the distance, stood Mount Vesuvius. It did not dominate the skyline with menace. It appeared as a broad green mountain vineyards creeping up its slopes. Generations had farmed its fertile soil. Earthquakes had struck before. The Great Tremor of 62 AD damaged buildings across Campania, but repairs were made. Life resumed. 17 years passed. 17 years of weddings, contracts, births, funerals. 17 years of confidence that whatever shook the ground had finished its work. On the morning of October 1779 AD, nothing felt different. Fishing boats drifted in the bay. Market stalls opened. Servants swept courtyards. If you walked along the Cardo III, you might pause at a thermopolium to purchase a midday meal, lentils, bread, perhaps wine diluted with water. You might pass graffiti etched casually in the plaster, small declarations of existence. You might glance toward the mountain and see only a familiar outline. Around midday, a sound split the sky. At first, it may have resembled distant thunder, a deep concussion rolling across the bay, then another, and another. When Vesuvius erupted, it did so with a violence no one in living memory had witnessed. A column of ash and gas blasted upward, climbing miles into the atmosphere. From Herculaneum, the sight would have been visible, a dark pillar expanding, flattening at the top like a pine tree canopy. But unlike Pompeii, which lay southeast of the volcano, Herculaneum initially experienced something different. The wind carried much of the early ash away from the town. Pumice did not fall in suffocating waves as it did elsewhere. For hours, Herculaneum may have felt spared. People gathered along the shoreline, watching. Some likely believed the worst would pass. The sea, however, began to behave strangely. It receded from the shore, drawn outward by atmospheric disturbance. Boats grounded in wet sand. Fish flopped in exposed shallows. As afternoon deepened, the sky darkened. Not gradually, like sunset, but abruptly, as though a lid had been placed over the world. Then, in the early hours of the following day, the eruption changed character. The towering column of ash collapsed, and what descended toward Herculaneum was not falling debris, but something far more lethal, a pyroclastic surge. A wall of superheated gas, ash, and volcanic material racing down the slopes at speeds that defied escape. Temperatures reached hundreds of degrees Celsius. The air itself became fire. When the first surge struck Herculaneum, it moved with terrifying speed. Within seconds, streets were engulfed. Wooden beams ignited instantly. Flesh vaporized. Roofs collapsed under thermal shock. Unlike Pompeii, which was buried slowly beneath accumulating pumice before being struck by surges, Herculaneum faced an immediate, overwhelming blast of heat. Those who had sought refuge along the shoreline, hundreds sheltering in stone boat chambers, were overtaken in an instant. There was no prolonged struggle, no dramatic final sprint, just sudden stillness. Over the next several surges, the town was buried beneath nearly 20 meters of volcanic material. Not loose ash, but hardened, compacted layers that would seal it completely. Buildings remained upright. Upper floors survived. Wooden furniture, carbonized but retained its shape. Time stopped, not in collapse, but in preservation. And then the mountain quieted. The sea returned. Above the buried town, the landscape hardened into dark stone. Centuries passed. New settlements rose. Memory faded. For nearly 1,700 years, Herculaneum slept in darkness. Its name became legend. Its streets became myth. Until in 1709, a well digger struck something beneath the ground. Fragments of marble, hints of walls. Excavations began. At first crude, tunneling through hardened volcanic rock to retrieve statues and treasures for royal collections. But as systematic archaeology developed, the true nature of what lay below became clear. Herculaneum was not a ruin. It was a sealed world. Wooden doors still hung on hinges. Beds remained in bedrooms. Scrolls lay in a seaside villa library, carbonized but intact, the only surviving library from the ancient world. Standing in those spaces today, one feels something different than at Pompeii. There is an intimacy here. Walls rise higher. Colors remain richer. The architecture feels less skeletal, more suspended, as though the inhabitants might return at any moment. But they never did. In the next part of this journey, we will walk through the Villa of the Papyri, descend into the boat chambers where hundreds waited for rescue, and stand above the layered cliff that now towers where the shoreline once was. We will compare what Herculaneum was, what it became, and what it reveals about how fragile certainty truly is. We begin again at the water's edge. But the shoreline you see today is not the shoreline they knew. In 79 AD, the sea touched the base of Herculaneum's western walls. Fishing boats rested only meters from the houses. Waves carried salt spray into open courtyards. The rhythm of tides marked time as surely as any sundial. Now, the coast lies hundreds of meters away. The eruption pushed the land outward, layering hardened volcanic material between the ancient town and the modern sea. What was once a harbor became a cliff of dark stone towering above what used to be beach. Stand there for a moment. Imagine looking up from the ancient shoreline and seeing the terraced homes rising above you, sunlight pouring down their facades. Imagine believing this place was permanent. Now follow me into one of the most extraordinary residences of the ancient world. The Villa of the Papyri stretched along the waterfront just outside the city walls, a vast complex of colonnaded gardens, reflecting pools and sea-facing rooms. It belonged, many scholars believe, to Lucius Calpurnius Piso Cassimninus, father-in-law of Julius Caesar. Whether or not he stood here himself, the villa radiated elite power. Picture walking through its peristyle garden. Bronze statues lined the pathways. Athletes poised mid-stride. Philosophers lost in contemplation. Water shimmered in long rectangular pools, mirroring columns that framed the horizon. Beyond them, the sea stretched uninterrupted to the edge of sight. Inside, rooms opened one into another with careful symmetry. Marble floors cooled bare feet. Walls were painted with architectural illusions. Columns that seemed to recede into imagined landscapes. Windows that opened under painted skies. And in one wing of the villa, something astonishing rested on wooden shelves. Hundreds of papyrus scrolls. A private library. In the ancient world, books were rare, expensive, and fragile. To possess a collection like this was to possess intellectual wealth. Philosophical treatises, likely Epicurean texts, lay rolled and tied, waiting to be read in quiet afternoons, while the sea breeze drifted through open windows. When the pyroclastic surge reached the villa, it did not scatter these scrolls, it carbonized them. The intense heat baked the papyri instantly, turning them black and brittle, but preserving their form. For centuries, they would lie in darkness, mistaken at first for lumps of charcoal when rediscovered. Only in modern times have scanning technologies begun to reveal the words still hidden inside. Voices from antiquity trapped within layers of volcanic fire move now from luxury to desperation. Along what was once the shoreline, archaeologists uncovered a series of stone boat chambers, arched vaults built to store vessels and equipment. During the eruption's early hours, as darkness fell and ash clouded the sky, hundreds of residents fled toward the sea. They may have hoped for rescue. Pliny the Elder, commanding the Roman fleet at Misenum across the bay, launched ships in an attempt to assist towns threatened by the eruption. We know from letters written by his nephew Pliny the Younger that he sailed toward danger out of both curiosity and duty. Whether any ship reached Herculaneum in time, we cannot say. But in those chambers, more than 300 skeletons were found. Men, women, children, some clutching small belongings, some huddled together, some facing outward, as though still watching the water for sails that never appeared. For centuries, it was believed that Herculaneum's population had largely escaped. The absence of bodies in early excavations supported that hope. The boat chambers changed everything. When the first pyroclastic surge struck, temperatures may have exceeded 400 degrees Celsius. Studies of the remains suggest that death came almost instantly. Thermal shock causing internal organs to fail in seconds. There was no long suffocation, as in Pompeii's ash-filled streets. There was no gradual burial. There was a flash of unbearable heat and then stillness. The surge passed, leaving behind layers of ash and debris that would harden into stone. Subsequent waves followed, each depositing more material, sealing the chambers completely. Inside the town, the same process unfolded. Wooden doors ignited and then carbonized, retaining their shape. Roof beams collapsed but did not rot. Even food remained in kitchens, sealed from oxygen by compacted volcanic layers. In one house, a loaf of bread was discovered still inside an oven. In another, a wooden cradle. Unlike Pompeii, where buildings were crushed under falling pumice before surges arrived, Herculaneum structures endured the initial blast intact, then were entombed beneath dense flows that pressed down but did not shatter. That is why today, Walking through Herculaneum feels different. The walls rise higher. Second stories remain. Balconies project over narrow streets. You can see carbonized roof beams overhead, preserved like charcoal sculptures. Descend the ancient corridor and look upward. You are not looking at foundations, you are looking into rooms. Frescoes still cling to plaster with startling vibrancy. Deep reds, ochres, blacks, colors shielded from sun and rain for nearly 2 millennia. In some homes, wooden furniture sits in place, its form intact though transformed into carbon. There is something unsettling about this level of preservation. It feels less like ruin and more like interruption, as though time paused mid-sentence. Stand inside the suburban baths today. The vaulted ceilings remain overhead. Mosaic floors ripple beneath your feet. Bronze water fixtures have long since been removed, but their impressions remain, faint outlines of daily ritual. Here, citizens once discussed politics beneath rising steam. Now visitors whisper in hushed tones. Walk through the House of the Deer, where marble statues of stags once stood in a garden courtyard, now displayed under open sky. Imagine the owner hosting guests, gesturing toward the sea, confident in the stability of his world. Walk through the House of the Skeleton, named for human remains found within, and feel how narrow the streets become, how close the walls press in. Everywhere, there are reminders that this was not an abstract civilization. It was domestic, it was intimate, and it ended in hours. Today, Herculaneum is smaller in scale than Pompeii's vast archaeological park. But many scholars consider it the more revealing of the two sites. Where Pompeii offers breadth, Herculaneum offers depth. In Pompeii, you see outlines of buildings. In Herculaneum, you step into them. Modern conservation efforts work constantly to protect what remains. Exposure to air and moisture threatens frescoes that survived untouched for centuries underground. Archaeologists balance excavation with preservation, knowing that revealing the past can also endanger it. And always above the town, Mount Vesuvius remains. It still rises beyond the ruins, green once more. Vineyards climbing its slopes, visitors photograph it casually, framing columns in the foreground. The mountain in the distance, it looks peaceful. It always did. That may be the most haunting truth of Herculaneum. Disaster did not announce itself with a monstrous silhouette or constant eruption. It stood quietly for generations, providing fertile soil and scenic beauty. It blended into the background of daily life. The people who lived here built bathhouses and libraries, negotiated contracts, raised children, invested in art and philosophy. They repaired earthquake damage and believed in continuity. They did not believe in endings. Standing in the ruins now, you can trace the grooves of ancient footsteps in stone. You can look into upper-story windows and imagine voices drifting down into the street. You can stand in the boat chambers and face the sea, knowing how the story concludes. But for them, there was only uncertainty, smoke in the sky, a trembling ground, a hope that the worst would pass. Herculaneum is not simply a story of destruction. It is a story of preservation through catastrophe. The very force that erased it from the living world protected it from decay. Fire became a conservator. Ash became an archivist. Volcanic stone became a vault. Because of that, we can walk through rooms where wooden doors still hang. We can study scrolls that survived infernos. We can see the grain of beams cut by hands nearly 2,000 years ago. And in doing so, we confront something uncomfortable. Certainty is fragile. Civilizations feel permanent when you are inside them. Streets feel eternal. Institutions feel stable. Mountains feel immovable. Until they are not. As we leave Herculaneum and return to the present, the town no longer feels like a distant relic. It feels immediate, close, almost contemporary. The sea still glitters in the distance. The mountain still watches. And beneath layers of hardened ash, a Roman town remains suspended in time. Not as rubble, but as a memory sealed in stone. Thank you for walking through it with me. Until next time.